Katanga. This is a suggestion from someone who watched my last video called Mark Rendazzo, and he said, I'd love to know what some of your favourite music books are. So, here we are. Let's start off with Mezz Mezzrow. This lovely old paperback that's obviously been well loved over the years, but I don't know if you know about Mezz, but he was one of the original jazzers that used to supply cannabis to jazz musicians. This is before the Second World War. This is before the heroin came in at the end of World War II. So this was like when it was cocaine and cannabis, you know, reefer. And he used to get a type of cannabis that was so strong, it's what Lord Buckley used to call two-toke shit. And they used to call it the Mezz. So he actually had a strain of cannabis named after him. And he's a really interesting guy, and this is about his story. And he ended up actually dying in Paris. And he's buried in Père Lachaise. And of course, when I went to Père Lachaise, he was the first guy I wanted to go and see. And then it was, of course, it's the Jacob Epstein statue on Oscar Wilde's grave. I don't know if you've ever seen that, it was absolutely marvellous. Anyway, I digress. Now, for some tawdry behaviour, and this really is tawdry behaviour. This is Up and Down with the Rolling Stones. I don't know if you know this one. Tony Sanchez, I can't remember. I think Spanish Tony, they used to call him. They all got silly names, these geezers, haven't they? And this is them at the time when, you know, when you'd want to be hanging around with them, when they were really debauched and doing lots of drugs and jailbait and all the rest of it. And this does deliver if you want all that kind of stuff. But if you do put rock stars on a pedestal, I wouldn't recommend reading any of these books because none of them come out of it very well, you know what I mean? They're not very good at parenting. Now, next one. This is the marvellous Nick Kent, and Nick used to come up to Camden and he used to get speed from a guy called Johnny. He used to be in the basement of what was then Vinyl Experience, which was a record shop that used to be, before that, Sea of Tunes, which was owned by Barry Appleby, who was the original co-founder of Rock On with Ted Carroll. And Barry, bless his heart, introduced me to Nick Kent. And Nick used to tell us all his Spinal Tap stories about the Stones and Led Zeppelin and all that. And this is a book that I got off a mate of mine. And as you can see, it's called Tim. I'll just read you what it says. To Tim, hope you write a book as good as this. Best regards, Nick Kent. And that is Nick's ego in a nutshell. Because Tim Tour, you can look him up. He wrote a very successful article on Primal Scream, and then was commissioned or not, I don't know what the story was, but he did write a book on Primal Scream, and I understand that it was nixed because it glorified drug use too much. So, there you have it. But anyway, Nick Kent, great stories in there, man. It's very entertaining. Again, if you put rock stars on a pedestal, do not read it. Right. It's a book on the Stones that's a picture book, pretty much. And it's their 1963 tour that they did with Bo Diddley and Little Richard and the Everly Brothers, you know. And it has got really marvellous backstage photos as well as on-stage photos. But I'd just like to show you. For example, it's got pictures like this of Bo Diddley backstage. And I've got to show the one of Little Richard. Oh, bless. Now, get my cases. Can you see Little Richard? He looks delighted, doesn't he, that some young teenage teddy boys have come to visit him. And if you look at the geezer in the back with the ocelot trimmed drape on, can you imagine what these geezers look like in 1963? So that's Bill Miller. Bill used to write all the rockabilly sleeve notes, and he's an expert on rock and roll, basically. And they used to turn up to all these gigs when these geezers used to come over, like Jerry Lee and Little Richard. They'd turn up and be furiously asking them all about, you know, recording sessions that they'd forgotten about because they were too out of it, you know. So anyway, that's a really good picture book. Loads of early Stones, loads of Brian in there and all that. These two, really excellent. They were like companions. Young Gift in Black, Tighten Up, pretty much self-explanatory. Trojan, History of Reggae, and Trojan Records. I mean, it's great, and they come with a CD. So you get a CD in each one as well. It's just a nice compilation of all the classic stuff that you know, but it's just nice to know the story about all the records, you know. So they're two really good books that you can get on reggae. I pulled this out just because it's just one of my favourite books. Nothing to do with music, but I just love this cover. I don't know if you're into Cocteau, but that is a really good one. Anyway, Hank Williams. Now, Colin Escott. Here's Colin Escott, yeah. Colin Escott is absolutely marvellous writer. He really understands rock and roll and all the roots of it, which is why he's writing about Hank Williams. This is a really good book. Any Colin Escott book, if you're looking for just music books that are really well researched and well written, and they're not sycophantic, and they're not, iconoclastic either. They're just really good books, and he really does evoke the sort of era that he writes about. But this one on Hank, you can do a lot worse and get this one. And any Colin Escott book is worth picking up anyway. Now here's one that was actually a big disappointment to me. As a beat collector, I'd heard about this book for a long time by Leroy Jones called Blues People. And he calls himself now Amory Baraka. Of course he does. He probably wears a dashiki and all that, you know what I mean? And these geezers used to look really cool, you know. They looked like John Coltrane back in the day, you know, 3-button suit and all that. And then, of course, they got rid of their slave name and just some made-up African one, you know what I mean? And then started dressing like, you know. Anyway, back to the book. This is absolute rubbish. And this is a geezer who lived through the era, and literally, you know, people I would have loved to have hung out with, you know what I mean? And just been at that time in the black culture and digging it all, and he just hasn't got a clue. I almost felt sorry for him, really. So I would definitely give that a miss. That one by Leroy Jones. Well overrated book. This, on the other hand, we've got another Colin Escott book. There you go. And this is just fantastic. Tattooed on their tongues. If you like country music, even if you don't like country music, you're going to love this, because this is just rock and roll all the way through. And the most unbelievable degenerates, sick minds, and really rotten at the core, selfish, preening tossers, you know, that you could ever come across in any musical genre. And they're all in here, George Jones, and there's one particularly nasty piece of work. Spade Cooley, is it? Yeah, let me just have a look. Because it's really shocking, man. I tell you, Roy Head. Has he got an introduction? I think it's Spade Cooley. Anyway, you want to see what he did to his missus. And it's got all about, what's his face? Hank Williams' missus. She was a wrong one as well. Yeah, it's a brilliant book, man. I thoroughly recommend that. If you want to read about country and western degenerates, this is the one, you know. And they were doing all this in the 50s, you know, when all these so-called wild rockers, you know, were like still in elementary school. Give me a break. Anyway, this is a marvellous one. Really great book. And Ike Turner is obviously one of the most important people in rock and roll. And I got this when I met Ike. I mean, make of that what you will for a signature. But I was getting that done with about 200 feminists standing behind me, shouting abuse at him. And we did manage to have quite a good little conversation about some recordings he'd done in the 50s under the name of Ike Turner, which is basically Ike Turner backwards. And he was just amazed that I knew what they were, and we had a nice little chat and stuff. But this book is, Christ, it's unbelievable. It's such a good read, you know. And forget all the stuff about Tina and all the, you know, the domestic violence and stuff that really taints him. He suffers from the same thing as Phil Spector, you know what I mean? That his whole music's been forgotten because of his reputation. And these people, they're all horrible people. Musicians are horrible people. I mean, that's just the way it is. You either accept that or you don't, you know. You have to separate the person from the artist from the art, you know. You really do. Otherwise, you wouldn't like anything, do you know what I mean? And this has a really marvellous story. It's all about how his dad was caught with a white woman back in the day, and the Klan came round and they beat him up, and he couldn't get into any local hospital because he was black, so they put a tent for him in the front yard, and they left him there to die. It took about 2 or 3 weeks for him to die. And Ike, as his young boy, he'd come out and he could smell his dad just decaying, you know, and this sort of shaped a lot of the way he thought about things and that. And there's one story in there about his mum. I'll tell you. I wasn't going to tell you. I'll tell you about it anyway. So his mum obviously used to straighten her hair with a comb. You know how they used to do it with the hot comb back in the day. They used to put it on the stove and then So, you know, black people of a certain age, they know that smell of burning hair, you know, and that's what the era my Ike comes from. So anyway, they had this hot comb on the stove, and his mum, bless her, exhausted after working or whatever, had taken off her clothes and passed out on the bed. And as Ike says, he could see her cat all exposed, and thought that the hair on it needed straightening. So he got this hot comb from the stove and applied it to her pubic hair to straighten it out. Thought he was doing her a favour. It didn't work out well for him, I'm afraid. But that's one of the better stories in there. Thoroughly recommend this book. Really great. Marvellous book about rock and roll and the whole Chitlin circuit and all that. And then this one is two of my favourite songwriters, Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller, who I absolutely adore. And I got this eagerly because I couldn't wait to find out what they said about Alligator Wine, which is the one they wrote for Scream and Jay Hawkins. It is not even in here, ladies and gentlemen. It's just not even mentioned. No Alligator Wine. So it's all the great Elvis stuff and, I mean, coasters and all the rest of it. You know what they did. And it's fantastic. And it's David Ritz who did the book, who did a really good one on Jimmy Scott. Just was a big disappointment for me. Not because it's not a good book, because it is a good book. And if you like Leiber and Stoller, I get it anyway, but I was just disappointed because it didn't have Alligator Wine in it, which I think is one of their best songs. Anyway, that's my little gripe. But I hope you enjoyed those. And if you like having a look through music books, I'll dig some more out for you. But I hope those were good recommendations for you. Okay, see you soon.